Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Tandy Sule, and um, I'm sorry. My name is Dr. Tandy Sule, and I'm a professor and the coordinator of the higher education program here at Oakland University. So welcome to today's workshop called Rewrite, Refine, and Publish, Transforming Your Dissertation into Journal Articles. The workshop is part of our professional development series this year. It's our fifth session this year, and this series is designed to provide you with the skills and tools needed to navigate higher education as well as your professional career. So we are welcoming three experts. So let me give them a brief introduction. Our first panelist is Dr. Jennifer Matthews. Dr. Matthews is the chair of the Department of Counseling and is currently the president of the Association for Deaf Education and Counseling. We also have Dr. Julia Smith. Dr. Smith is the PhD program coordinator here in the School of Education. Dr. Smith brings a wealth of experience in guiding graduate students through the dissertation process. He has published over 60 um, articles and book chapters and has chaired over 100 dissertations or served on way more dissertation committees. And we have Dr. Richard Olawoyin. Dr. Olawoyin is professor of industrial and systems engineering. He served as a Fulbright scholar in the Dominican Republic and received the 2025 Fellow Award from the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology. So welcome. Um, to our panelists. The session is divided into three parts. We're going to have a brief discussion um, by the panelists. They're going to talk a little bit about their dissertation process. And then we're going to have a moderated section, which is about 30 minutes. And then we're going to open it up for a Q&A. But if you have any questions along the way, please write them in the chat so that we can get to them at the end. Um, and also, if you would like to speak, you can do that as well at the end. But do not hesitate to write your questions down because we really are trying to get to them. Our graduate assistant is in the chat, Maddie Madison. She is a student in the Department of Counseling, so she will be monitoring the chat for us today. So we're going to start with a discussion from the panelists, and they're going to talk about their dissertations. They're going to talk about their dissertation topic as well as their current research trajectory. They're going to discuss the key publishing outlets for their field, and they're going to discuss where and how you can publish or they publish their dissertations. So we will start with Dr. Matthews.
Okay, it's really great to be here, and it's nice to see so many counseling alumni in the Zoom room. Um, so I had to think back. This was in 2012, but my dissertation, it focused on ethnic identity development and social cognitive development of counselors in training as a result of participating in a multicultural self-awareness group. And so it was a quantitative, quasi-experimental study, and I looked at the constructs of ethnic identity development as um, as this construct as relation to the multi-group ethnic identity measure, and then social cognitive development using the Washington University sentence completion. And so I wanted to see, as a result of students participating in a 15-week experience that I created, would there be any differences in ethnic identity development or social cognitive development, and what was the impact of group therapeutic factors? And so um, I solicited participants across four institutions where we implemented this group protocol, and then had a control group. And so all of the statistical analyses um, And so it really kind of helped me to one, frame my research in terms of multicultural counseling, but then another bucket being counselors in training and counselor education and supervision, and that third bucket being grief counseling that I later on added into my research agenda. And so, um, as I'm looking at some of the notes that I've taken, so I use these three buckets as a way of when I'm currently doing research that it's typically falling into one of these, either multicultural counseling, counselor in training, development, or grief counseling. Even though my dissertation, it was quantitative, I've started doing more qualitative research. And so, looking at, for example, phenomenological experiences of African American males as a result of the Zimmerman trial, I was really interested at that time in terms of understanding the lived experiences of Black males. And so that marries the two of multicultural counseling and grief counseling. Um, and then moving into kind of the present, looking at African American male pastors and specifically their grief experiences as they're working with their congregants. And so holding space for grief for themselves, but also congregants and how that works for them and what's their lived experience, what type of coping skills are they utilizing and or not utilizing. Within the field of counseling, I would say the key publishing outlets would be our flagship journals. So, the Journal of Counselor Education and Development, Journal of Counselor Education and Supervision, and then JMCD, Journal of Multicultural Counseling and Development. Fortunately, I've been able to publish in two out of the three over the course of my career thus far, which I'm proud of. And then in thanatology, which is the study of death, dying, and bereavement, two of the flagship journals are Omega, Journal of Death and Dying, and then we have Death Studies. Um, to the third point, as I'm wrapping up my 3 minutes, where and how have I published my dissertation? So I actually did a pilot study prior to my dissertation, and it helped me prepare for the actual study. And so it was an abbreviated group experience, and I published that in the Journal of the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. And I specifically chose that journal because it was focused on how we teach students, and not just counselors in training, but the wide discipline of pedagogy. My dissertation I published in the Journal of Counselor Education and Supervision. And I chose that. I had a larger sample size for my dissertation study. The results, I had a mix of statistically significant results and some great implications for clinical supervision.
Hmm. Thank you,
Sure.
Dr. Smith.
Yeah. So my dissertation was actually framed by an experience I had when I was training to be a teacher in high school. I was going to be a math teacher. And so my intro process was they put you in a classroom and to observe. My classroom was the basic skills class at Pioneer High School in Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor is about 10% African American. The class I was observing was 97% African American, and I began to suspect there was a problem here. So, in doing my doctoral work, I became very involved in the quandaries of social access to mathematical training. And that was my dissertation topic. Who gets early access to algebra as a launching point to mathematical training? What kinds of experiences students have when they do or do not have that access, and then what kinds of paths do they end up following in high school as a result of that access. So the dissertation basically was built around those three questions. I divided each of those questions into its own article to publish. One was published in Journal of Research and Education. One was published in Educational Evaluation and Policy Analysis. And I think the third one was in Sociology of Education. I'll have to take a look at that one. Just a moment, I have to cough. So in order to get at this topic, I am very, very fond of secondary data sources. So I became deeply familiar with all kinds of access to data that are already collected and existing, which allowed me to structure the answers to all three of my questions around nationally representative samples. That's become the way that I've built out my research process. I get a question that I'm interested in. I go looking for a data set that might be related. And if I can't find one, then I pair up with somebody who has more skills in original data collection. Like when about, oh heavens, 15 years ago, I got curious about whether requiring students to say the Pledge of Allegiance had any kind of impact on their understanding of civic responsibility. There wasn't any data set on this. So I paired up with a professor in social sciences at Oakland University, and we did a lovely pair of studies on this whole thing. The key publishing outlets for my field, I actually have different fields depending on what my questions are. In education, the key journals are, all of them are journals. Let's start with that. Very few of my colleagues develop books until after they have tenure. The reason for that is that when you're developing tenure, one article equals one book. So you can have 4 articles or one book. That's not a hard equation. So Journal of American Education Research Journal, AERJ, Journal of Higher Education, Journal of Early Childhood Education, Sociology of Education is I'm a big fan of that one. Educational Evaluation and Policy Analysis, those are the main ones that I go to. But pretty much the approach that I have for any article that I'm writing is I look at the best journal, I send it there, I get rejected, I take the feedback, and then I work my way down the list. So any study that you put energy into, you got to get it published. That's just, if you don't, it's just an enormous waste. I think that covers all of your questions.
Yep. Okay. Dr. Olawoyin.
Thank you, and thanks all for joining us today. For me, my PhD is in energy engineering from Penn State University, and my dissertation, I worked on the application of expert systems in the characterization and impact of petroleum derivatives, because my dissertation aligned with my degree, which was in energy engineering, and the core of the work that I did was in the early application of machine learning and artificial intelligence, specifically chemometrics, as well as artificial neural networks and self-organizing map. That means I use both the supervised and unsupervised learning methods, as well as GIS science, to be able to characterize petroleum deposits and also the environmental risk associated, with petroleum derivatives. And as far as the methodology, for my work, the goal was not only about using, machine learning and also expert systems for prediction, but also interpretability, so that people can be able to make good decisions based on the results. And that was very important to me, even at that time. And the models that I designed at that time were, directly about informing the target identification of petroleum and natural gas deposits, as well as carrying out effective risk assessment and, providing a way to be able to make, good energy-related decisions rather than just remaining very theoretical. Most engineering dissertation that you see. Some of them, they look very abstract, but it was very important to me to be able to provide even some means for interpretability so that people can understand the application of the work itself. And that foundation basically now directly supports my current research, which is in the intersection of machine learning and engineering statistics, as well as artificial intelligence-driven risk and reliability modeling. And I also work on smart industrial systems and safety by design. And across all of this trajectory, I've been able to, publish over 60 peer-reviewed publications, including a book and also 7 book chapters with extensive conference activity. And I'm saying all of this because the foundation that my dissertation allowed me to be able to build, led to all of these different successes. And the second part of the question is the key outlet. So similar to Dr. Smith, depending on the question that I have, because my work is also kind of interdisciplinary, because if you look at my skill sets, it intersects between engineering, sciences, and also public health, because I looked at how to use all of these methods to make sense and to provide good information for our communities. And in terms of my publication outlet, I selected at that time expert systems with applications, because expert systems is the precursor to artificial intelligence that we have right now, and that was what I worked on. And because I also worked on chemometrics, which is the chemical measurement, I published in Chemosphere, and as well as ecotoxicology and Journal of Safety Research. And more recently, as my work has transitioned into smart industrial systems and optimization and core of artificial intelligence, I now publish in avenues like IEEE Access, as well as SAE, the Society of Automotive Engineers, the flagship publication, and as well as intelligent transportation systems. But the key lesson that I emphasize to students and also collaborators is that the importance of matching the journal scope to the methodological contribution, as well as the application domain and the intended audience, because that is very, very important when you're thinking about where to select, to publish your work. Because you just don't want to publish your work to be able to have a citation on your CV. You really want to publish so that it can be useful to people. And the way you gauge that is by how many people are reading your work and citing your work, for example. So you can have a presence on Google Scholar and Scopus and all other areas where people, will find your work useful and cite them. So where and how I published my dissertation. So, similar to Dr. Smith again, it's just very interesting as I was listening to Dr. Smith. My dissertation was structured as well intentionally as a 3-part manuscript model. And what I did was each article addressed a distinct research question. And it was written at journal quality, and it was also submitted for peer review during my PhD. And some of them were submitted after the PhD, but the chapters in my dissertation, many people can Google my dissertation and you'll be able to find they actually published articles that I use for my chapters. And following graduation, those chapters were expanded, some of them refined and reframed to be able to meet disciplinary, journal expectations. Because I had to emphasize on 3 major areas, the methodology, as well as, clear articulation of novelty, because that's what most reviewers of journals will be looking for. Are you presenting anything novel? As well as positioning beyond the dissertation format. And that approach basically accelerated my publication pipeline and also laid the groundwork, for a sustained, funding. Because if you're thinking about, becoming a faculty or an academic or a scholar in the future, you also have to think about how your dissertation can project you and can also support your work as a scholar. And as a scholar without funding, it's going to be very difficult to be able to do that. So your work, your publications will also be tied to how much funding you can get, as a scholar.
Thank you. So the first question that I have for you is, why should students publish their dissertations? Very simple question.
Is that for me?
This is for you or
Okay. All
for
right.
anyone.
Well,
This is for
all right.
anyone on the panel, actually.
Oh, I thought you were
Actually,
talking to me
so
directly,
students
but
have
Richard,
worked.
you said you were going to respond to it first, so I'm letting you go first.
okay. Okay. All right. All right. So basically, the dissertation is often the most comprehensive and intellectually, rigorous research project a scholar will ever undertake. And I'm sure all of our panelists will agree with me because, it represents years of sustained inquiry, methodological depth, and, also all of the different things that comes with, dissertation, frustration, and everything else.
Mhm.
And at the core of all of this is the original contribution, which is key. Because I've seen a lot of people struggle to be able to define what is original, because you have to be original, particularly, for PhD, you just have to make it original. So, you know, after all of these different things, if you allow the work to just sit there without publishing, it's a very missed opportunity. So publishing from the dissertation, does several, a few things. And the first one is that it can actually establish a scholarly identity early. At least for me, it was able to signal, what problems I was working on and the
Mm.
methods I was using, and people were able to, associate with me early. I was able to belong to a particular community early in my career, just because of the kind of work and the kind of questions I was asking at that time. And secondly, it also demonstrates research independence because with your peer-reviewed publication efforts, it will show that the scholar can frame questions as well as develop and execute methods and also communicate in terms of dissemination of the results beyond the advisory committee. Because the
Mm.
advisory committee, as we know, it's only limited. But if you send out your work for publication, for peer review, to the peer review process, it's more extensive than just the committees that look at your work. And thirdly, it will also strengthen, competitiveness, for academic positions. As I mentioned earlier, if you're
Okay.
thinking about becoming an academic or getting a postdoc position, and also applying for grants that I've mentioned, grant is always very important to the institutions that you will go to, and also to your career, because you need money to be able to, to do more research. So publications are very, a common currency across all of these pathways. And also, the peer review process itself will improve the work that you're doing, because reviewers often will sharpen, your methodology. And I'm sure many of the panelists here will also, discuss about their experiences, through this process, particularly when they just started. I'm sure every one of us, there was a time we began to submit our papers and they were rejected, and how we felt and everything like that, because the process itself, sharpened for me, sharpened the way I approach problems and also the way I even receive feedback. And finally, it's important because, publishing prevents valuable research to just sit there to be archived and unread. So a dissertation should be the starting point and not the end point. And in that sense, when you publish, it helps you generally, and it also, projects you into the academic community that you become, that you will live in, because that's going to be your future. So publishing, it should be a natural extension of your doctoral, research mission. Shouldn't be the end point, because some people will say, after my dissertation, no more research,
I'm
except if
done.
you want to
Yes.
decide, not to do any more scholarly work. But if you want to use this process, use this time as a learning process for you to be able to develop more interest, more passion, and also to just get in tune to, to the work that you're doing.
Okay. So it sounds like you're saying that we have a civic responsibility to publish as well as for our personal development.
Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
Dr. Smith, do you have anything to add?
Well, I think the main thing that I have to add for why to publish is it makes the work better. It gets the work out there. And the things that you are working on in your dissertation are important. not just to you. So the more you make that available to other people, the greater impact that information has. And it's not so much about you, it's about the work. Because people can't build on what it is that you've learned if they don't know what you learned.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's incredibly valuable.
Okay. So if a student is interested in publishing, when should they start? I know that Dr. Olawoyin talked about publishing. His dissertation was basically 3 articles. So should they start thinking about it like second, third year in, or should they wait until the entire thing is done? Like when should they seriously start thinking about publishing, where to publish, things like that? Dr. Mathis.
Well, I think it's a combination. I don't know that there's one right answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I completed a pilot study, I think in my second year of my doctoral work, and I immediately published that
Okay.
after. And so I was already in the mindset of I knew I wanted to publish my dissertation. It was just a matter of how I would do it. And so, similar to everyone else, I took my research questions and turned those into an article for the dissertation. And I just lost steam. I could have squeezed out a second
I noticed that.
article,
I
and I
noticed
was
you
like,
said one
ugh.
article. I noticed you said one article. Can we jump to that? Because that's a question that students have. How many articles? What can you
I
what
think
can
it
you
depends. I
yeah,
really
okay.
probably could have published two or three out
Okay.
of my dissertation. I was tired. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that that's a reality that, there's so much energy and anticipation completing the dissertation that
yes,
you're pushing yourself even
yeah.
more. But I think what helps is kind of knowing ahead of time that going back to the original, when should I start? Knowing ahead of time that I do want to publish an article or two and almost working with your dissertation chair in terms of, how can I plan this out? If I
Mm-hmm.
take out a research question, I know that that can be possibly an article or a second article for another research question. And then I would say not waiting too late. So, in both the pilot study and in my dissertation publications, I did it pretty immediately after. And so we know that the longer that we take in between working on a manuscript, we have to reacquaint ourselves. And I've done this in a revised resubmit that I'm working on now that I've had for quite a long time. Every time I go back to it, I'm reacquainting
Mm-hmm.
myself with it, getting to know the topic again. And the research changes. And so the longer
Mm-hmm.
that we have in between, it makes it one a little bit more difficult to jump back in and do it, but we also need to update ourselves on the current literature in the field.
Okay.
What I would add to
Okay.
that is a mechanism that I don't know if it's particularly available in all the fields, certainly available in education. Um, if the bar to getting yourself to submit something for publication feels large, the place to start is to think about presenting something out of your dissertation. And you can do that as you develop it, as you finish a lit review, as you decide on your methods, as you work through the
Hmm.
process of writing up your findings, you can submit proposals to present your material. And what that does is if you get accepted to present, that gets your stuff out there and you get feedback. And every presentation can become its own like piece that you're thinking about separately. You're preparing, it's going out to the world. That is a much shorter leap into the publication process than from I'm just writing for myself and my committee to I'm going to send this out there and get reviewed and rejected. Because you do get rejected. It's hard in reality. But
You know what else I
Presenting
like
is a,
about that, if I can
yeah,
interrupt,
go
is
ahead,
it
please.
holds us accountable when we do the
Hmm.
presentations and we get accepted, we know we have to prepare for that presentation. So I wanted to just add that
Absolutely.
piece.
Yeah, that definitely
Uh,
does help.
Yeah, and there are all kinds of different avenues. There's national avenues, which are fabulous, but there's also state and even some local research associations. Every field has got a plethora of conferences, and having been on the other side of reviewing papers for conferences, we're looking for stuff. So it's a lower bar, it's a easier connection, and it gets you shifting your perspective to how am I going to talk about this to people who don't know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And you really do need that for a publication process to make sense.
So far, what I hear you saying is that students can prepare by one, focusing on the three-article dissertation, which is what Dr. Olawoyin did, or presenting your work at a conference, correct?
Mm.
So can you talk a little bit about the difference between a dissertation, the structure of a dissertation, and the structure of an article or a book chapter? And I think that your suggestion about a conference presentation probably gets students closer to sort of configuring a paper that looks like a journal article. But what are some things they should think about um, once they have this 400 page or 200 page document? How do they turn that into a journal article or a chapter?
You cut a lot of text. Okay, the place where I always start with writing a journal article is I decide on a journal that I'm going to aim for. That's step one.
Mm-hmm.
And then I make sure that it fits with what the paper's about, but I also use that to get example articles recently published from that journal that will tell me what the structure is that they're looking for. Every journal's got a different structure. Some have 4 sections, some have 3, some have 6. You got to write to what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So having an outline really helps me figure out, all right, what am I going to put in each of these sections? And then you've got a word limit. You've got to make it real efficient. So essentially, I don't think of it as trying to turn a dissertation into an article. I think of it as trying to create an article out of the words that I've already generated for a dissertation.
Mm.
But you start with that outline. If the journal doesn't see things they recognize, they don't want to look at it. And getting rejected even before somebody reviews it is kind of an enormous pain. You would at least like to have somebody look at it, read it, and then say no, as opposed to, oh, well, this doesn't look like a journal article. No, thank you. Um, Working from that outline, it's a lot easier to pick out, okay, this is what I really need to cover for them,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to this is what I need to cover for the entirety of my dissertation. So that's
Okay.
that's my
Okay.
approach.
Yeah, just to add to that, and I
Mm-hmm.
completely agree. That's a great strategy. And one other good idea is to structure those chapters around clear research questions, as well as the methods and the result, particularly in engineering, because that will actually help to make the conversion process from dissertation
Mm.
to a journal article to make that
Mm-hmm.
process smoother. And one other thing you want to also do is the method sections, because sometimes the method sections could be very lengthy. So you want to
Mm-hmm.
make it concise, and because journals basically expect clarity and transparency, not excess detail that you have in a dissertation.
Yeah.
So writing that in mind and starting with that will also help with the revision time to be easier. And another point, especially for those joining us in sciences or engineering, is that you want to keep a well-documented data set and the different versions of your analysis that you've conducted, because you want to treat your data and your codes as publishable artifacts, not just
Mm.
supporting materials. This is important, particularly if you're doing work in data analytics or machine learning or even systems research. And another point is that, you have to document each of the, novelty of your work explicitly. Because, as you know, your committee members and your chair often will infer originality, but journals reviewers, they
Oh,
want to, they want you to be able to state exactly the contribution that you're making. So what is new in terms of the method and the empirical method that you're using, or even conceptual method, if you're working on any kind of new concept or prototype. So as you're developing your dissertation, also try to track the figures and the tables that can migrate directly into a manuscript. You can track them. Um, you know, that's why I tell my students, my dissertation students, my PhD students, to always use high quality, publication ready visuals, because that will reduce the friction to help to preserve consistency between the dissertation and also the journal articles. So when you take all of this together, and the decision to be able to convert your dissertation into an article will just be easier and even more efficient, and it will be less stressful. And in fact, it will be exciting for you to do if you begin to think about this earlier than
yeah.
if you wait until you publish your dissertation, because there's always a need to take a break after dissertations, as Dr. Matthews mentioned. So, think about this holistically, and it will be helpful in the long run.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just going to throw in there, because I have a current student who originally was working on a 3 manuscript approach and determined that it was not going to work for her. You don't have to be thinking in terms of articles while you're writing the dissertation. You can legitimately and effectively take a large idea, write it, and then think about how you're going to break it into smaller pieces as you go. So don't feel like if I don't do a three
Okay.
journal dissertation, I can't turn it into an article or 2 articles or 3 articles. When I was doing my dissertation, there was no 3 manuscript approach. I still got 4 out of it, so that was good. But the idea is that the dissertation goal and the journal writing goal are really different. For the dissertation, the goal is to get the research done and done correctly and well, and communicate to your dissertation committee that you know what you're talking about. That's not necessarily the same goal for journal articles. So it is okay to separate those out if that's where you are. There is absolutely no reason why you can't write many articles out of a dissertation that doesn't have a 3 manuscript approach. So I'm just going to throw that in there,
I think,
mostly because of Elizabeth.
yeah, I like that, and I think it's affirming. And it also level sets expectations. The other piece I would add is I have in the past reached out to editors of journals and said, hey, this is the topic that I am considering submitting to your journal. Can you let me know if this might be appropriate? And this is after I've already read the guidelines of the journal, what they're expecting. But if I ever had a question, you can always reach out to the editors, and I have found them to be extremely helpful in giving me feedback in that way.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, and I agree, there is no universal advice, for everyone on this call, on how to develop your dissertation and how to prepare. In my case, the 3 journal article worked for me because of my field, because of the questions I was asking. If you have that same approach, I think you may want to consider, because as you know, dissertation, they're more comprehensive, they're exhaustive, and they are written for a small expert committee, maybe at most 5. At Oakland, I think sometimes between 3 and 5. But a journal is more focused, it's concise, and it's more argument driven, and it's written for global scholarly audience.
Yeah.
So if you want to combine the 2 goals, I see no reason why you should not be able to do that, because I did it. It worked for me. People that graduated in my set, they did not do it. So that's what I'm saying. There is no universal agreement on how you should do this. I did that because I thought it was necessary. And that's why, when I look at my productivity today in terms of publications, in terms of, book publication as well as chapter publications and grant funding, I actually saw that opportunity that I took at that time to be very, very valuable. Yeah.
Thank you. So we are on a section on selecting an outlet, and I think that you addressed most of my questions because Dr. Matthews talked about contacting the journals and letting them know what she's considering in terms of publishing. And Dr. Smith earlier said that she starts at the top, the highest ranked journal, and then moves down. So, are there any other suggestions for students in terms of selecting a journal for their research?
I like the starting at the top. I went with the flagship journal and I said, let me shoot my shot here. Why
Yeah.
not? So I agree with that. I think it's what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that could happen is really getting feedback, and that's what we want. And that's not
Mhm.
the worst case scenario. It's an opportunity to get some great feedback to improve your manuscript and to resubmit to
Yep.
another, to the same journal or to another journal outlet.
So
Yeah.
when I finish, oh, Dr. Smith, were you gonna say
I
something?
was just I was just pondering. I think that my current record for number of journals that I've submitted an article to is 9.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? I thought
Well,
I was doing good at like seven,
yeah,
seven
I've got
rejections.
9. Well, this was a really hard to place paper, but it finally found a home. And you don't give up on an article just because somebody doesn't want it. Somebody else will. So you just
I
have to
think
be
that's great.
stubborn.
I remember as a graduate student, one of faculty told me that every article has a home. So don't let the rejection stop you.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So remember that.
Well, Dr. Sule, to add to, the question
Hmm.
you asked about, how do you select,
Okay.
yeah. So I advise students, because sometimes before you begin, you have to do a literature review. And
Hmm.
I usually advise, students to start with the journals that they cite most frequently,
Yeah,
because,
that's a good
if,
one.
if a
Okay.
journal consistently,
Oh,
appearing
yeah,
in your
yeah.
in your literature review, it's more likely already that that's part of the scholarly
Hmm.
conversation what is going into. So it's important to, take a look at that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and also
That's a
for
good piece
those
of advice as well. I mean, if as you're writing for the journal, make sure you cite articles that are from that journal, that very journal. So it's kind of related to what you're saying that,
absolutely,
yeah.
yeah.
You were going to say something else. I know I jumped in.
Well, yeah, just to just to round up the point, also recent issues as well in that area because
Oh,
it's not
yeah,
just
yeah,
only
exactly.
about. I think Dr. Matthews mentioned that before. Looking at recent issues and those in science and engineering again, because I mean, just all fields, because I think all fields, especially those working on quantitative research, you have to
Hmm.
look at papers with similar kind of data sets and methods that you're using, because that
Hmm.
will provide some kind of interest for the reviewers and also the editors, because the publication process is a two-part process. You submit your paper, and the editor will look at the fit of the paper to see if it's actually fit for publication in that avenue, even before they send it out for peer review. So if it is not, if the kind of data sets that you're working on, if it's not
Yeah,
consistent with the kind of idea or the framework for that journal platform, it will be rejected even before review. So you have to look at the kind of data sets and methods you're using, and also the theory that you're framing that will actually be favorable to that journal outlet.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're going to jump to authoring and get this question a lot. Do students want to know if they have to list their dissertation chair as a co-author on any journal articles that they publish? Anyone want to jump in on that?
So I did. My dissertation was the second author on both the pilot study and the article for my
Mhm.
dissertation. Um, and he was actively involved in every step of the way. And so I know one of the questions is about how is author rank established, but
We can address that as well if you
Mm,
want. We can
yeah,
cover
because
that.
it's
Yeah.
it's
yeah.
very much
Yeah.
tied in.
Hmm.
So he was the second author, and it was, I would also say that was the culture within the program. that I
Okay.
attended that the chair would be the second author as an active contributor to
Mm.
That is so
the article.
interesting. It wasn't
Yeah,
the culture in my program. I don't know. Yeah, so I
yeah,
always find that question interesting that the chair is a co-author on
yeah.
your journal articles, but the chair does work actively with students. So it's, yeah, interesting.
So
Right. And I would say for the journal article, I was writing that in conjunction with my chair at that point.
Oh,
It
okay. Okay.
wasn't
Oh, that's
still
different.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
very collaborative even for the journal
Okay.
article.
Okay. That makes sense.
yeah, he the training that I had from Valerie Lee was that anytime we're working on a research piece of any kind, a very early, like day two conversation is what will the authorship be? And that is critical. You have that conversation with your chair, you have that conversation with your committee. If there was a committee member that was engaged in actively working with the data with you, um, they don't necessarily need to be on the paper, but
Wait,
you
Dr.
want
Smith,
to,
is this when the student is dissertating, like during the
yeah,
dissertation process, you have
yeah,
that? Okay.
you have
Okay.
that I
Okay.
have that conversation with every single student.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
oh yeah, absolutely. I also have that conversation with every single co-author. I'm a huge co-author fan. I'm very fond of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so anytime I'm engaging with a new topic or a new conversation, let's talk about authorship. Now, since I'm a full professor, I always go last because I don't need it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very important conversation. And it's professional.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have that kind of professional relationship, even when you've got a closer, emotional support relationship with your chair. When it comes to publication, it's professional. And when you're the first author, you're the one that's making the decisions. But if you have a co-author, they also get to say no.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a serious thing to think about. And it is a serious conversation. It's not a given. It's not something that everybody has the same views on. Even across professions, it's different orders for different kinds of things. Like I was very surprised when I was working with Dr. Betsy Lozoff, who's in medicine, that the first author is always the person who has the grant, and the last author is the person who's actually writing the paper. And then the ones in between have to jockey for position. So I
Oh,
didn't know that at all. So that
and
was
it's the
fascinating.
reverse for us. First
Yeah,
author is the one that's doing most of the work. It's their
Mm-hmm.
idea, and the last author would be doing not as much as the first author.
exactly right.
Yeah.
So it varies from context to context as well.
Yeah, and that's true. It actually varies as well. But in general, authorship should reflect meaningful scholarly contribution. People contributing substantive, intellectual input and also doing the writing. Because I've seen many students just so that their committee members, can look favorably on them. They probably maybe they don't even share the paper or even the work with the advisory members, and they put the member's name on the paper. I've always discouraged that kind of work because I agree with Dr. Smith. It has to be, professional and ethical. This is a very serious thing that everyone should, always think about because, and also the discussion of the authorship early. It's a very good thing to do so that
Mm-hmm.
you can set out the expectations. You can set out and begin to build that professional relationship and gain the trust and also the respect of everyone. Because if someone, for example, provides substantive intellectual input into your work, and if you take out their name, that's also not ethical. And if they do, then there should be no reason not to include their name. But there is no universal, agreement or rule that a chair of a dissertation must be on the paper. Though I did it because, of course, I worked very closely with my dissertation advisor on the couple of first few papers that I published. until I was able to actually stand on my own and I started publishing. In fact,
Mm.
a good advisor will advise you to just do work on your own as well, even if they oversee what you do, just to establish you as an independent scholar. They will advise you to do things like that by yourself, not always, having people to guide you or to contribute. You can also think about that too, independent authorship at some point.
Yeah, actually, Valerie was very specific when she worked with students to not have her name on any publication that came out of the dissertation, largely because she wanted to help the student get their independent work out there without, looking like she's a crutch,
Yeah.
which I appreciated.
I could see
And
that.
I definitely do that with my students as well.
So we talked a little bit about the peer review process. Well, we talked about getting rejected during that peer review process. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to continue unless there's a question from the audience. Let me check again. Okay, can you just talk a little bit about the peer review process, and then we'll jump to this question. Well, let's focus on rejections. Let's focus on getting rejected or getting feedback. What do we do with that? We get 4 pages of feedback and we get a major revision request. Should
Well,
we just move
my
on?
no, my example, let's see, what did we do? So we had a 12-page article that we had submitted to New England Journal of Medicine on iron deficiency anemia's impact on child development. And it used hierarchical linear modeling. And the expert statistician who reviewed it obviously didn't know what this was and gave us 3 pages of comments back about why this was deeply problematic. So we went through every one of his points line by line and wrote a response to each one of his 37 points. The paper was 12 pages. Our response letter was 45. It got published, so yay. But sometimes your reviewers need to, all right, let me rewind. My experience is that I get 3 types of revise and resubmit comments from reviewers. First is legitimately, the way you wrote this doesn't make sense to me. You need to make it make sense. The second is, there's stuff about this that you haven't talked about that I think is important. Then I decide whether or not I feel like that's actually something that needs to be taken up with the writing time. Usually if I have a word limit, I'll question that. The third is, I don't understand what you're talking about, and I think that what you did was incorrect. That third one is the one that I push back on. But the first 2 are basically saying, the way you wrote it may make sense to you, it doesn't make sense to me. And the obligation is to make sense to me, the person who's reading it. So those I take seriously and work hard to try to figure out, what have I said? What have I left out? How can I make this more clear?
Thanks.
And one of
the
the
other piece is just,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, the other piece is balancing too. There's been maybe a few times where I have disagreed with a reviewer based on their incorrect understanding of the construct. And so I'll push back, because if I were to change it, that's
Yeah.
impacting my integrity and my professionalism and my professional understanding of the construct. And so I do agree that there are different levels of types of rejection, and just determining, how much am I willing to change this manuscript, modify it to accommodate the reviewer, and or is it worth it to look to another journal outlet?
Mm.
Yeah.
And
And I just wanted to add to that, one of the most important lessons, to remember during rejection is that is to be able to separate the critique of the work that you submitted from the critique of yourself.
Mm,
Because sometimes when you receive this
very
rejection,
important.
I mean,
Yeah.
it weighs down on you. I can tell
Yes.
you that. Because peer review basically evaluates the manuscript, not your intelligence or your
Yeah.
potential as a scholar, because some people get rejected and they give up. And I agree, that there are three or even more levels of rejection. But the important thing here that is how do you respond? When you're responding similar to what Dr. Smith mentioned, you have to be able to respond respectfully as well as systematic in terms of responding to each reviewer. Actually, I think the document is typically labeled response to reviewers. So you have to address point by point, counter by
Right.
counter,
Yeah.
yes, every reviewer comment. Very quickly, I know we are running out of time. One of the papers I submitted to my co-advisor during my dissertation was, we received 9 different reviewers' comments, dozens of pages, similar to what Dr. Smith mentioned. So
9.
That's a
9 reviewers.
lot. That's a
It was
lot.
in ecotoxicology. I couldn't
Oh, yeah.
believe it when I saw it. I was like, what am I supposed to do? So basically, what I encourage students to do, which was the same thing I did, was to look at the revision rounds as an opportunity, not a hurdle, because we went through almost 4 different levels. I didn't give up because I really wanted that journal. I really wanted my work to be featured there because the methodology basically aligned better with the focus of that journal. So we all have to remember that the peer review process is a dialogue. It's not a verdict. So we have to be thoughtful in our feedback and how we respond and look at every opportunity. Look at
Exactly.
and I think someone actually put in something in the chat right now that it's something in the lines of, it's an opportunity for improvement. So
Yeah.
once you're rejected, of course, there's going to be a time that you have to decide, do I have to look for a different journal? But if you're really focused on a particular journal just because of the benefit that you see at the end, I think you should follow what we've discussed today to be respectful and be be systematic in how you respond to those comments.
Thank you for that. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I do want to address the question that a student posed. Let me first state that this was a great session. It was really insightful. I really enjoy these panel sessions that we have for our series. So thank you for that. If you have to leave, we understand, but I want to address this question because we talked about it a little bit prior to our session. What happens if you're not going into academia? Does the same advice apply?
So I like Dr.
Yeah.
Shai's question.
Yeah.
And I would say presentations, clinically focused journal outlets, which counseling has a number of them, could be a good
Education
fit.
too.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then also non-peer reviewed outlets, which could be varied. So it depends on what the end goal is and the
Hmm.
audience that you're looking for. If it's more clinically focused, then there are some non-peer reviewed outlets within counseling that could be a fit.
Yeah. It's also, I think the basic question that you're asking yourself is, does this information need to get out there? And then from that standpoint, you're looking around to figure out, all right, if I was looking for this information, where would I look for it as a professional, as a
Hmm.
practitioner? And then go there, because that is going to be your best way to get it to the people who need to know.
Okay.
And just finally, if you're not going into academia, one other point that I like to make, which I have seen happen many times, because in STEM, I think most people don't go into becoming a professor or in those lines, but you have to keep your collaborators close. So you still have to publish if you want, because some people still work in R&D in the industry, and aside that, people still like to see that their work is not just sitting somewhere. So you can keep your collaborators in the academic circle close and discuss about methods because, if you've published, like I think most of us on this call, and on this panel, we've graduated more than a decade ago now. And, the methods that we use then, of course, they've been refined over and over for today.
Mhm.
So you cannot keep that work and hope to publish after 10, 20 years, the same thing. So keep your collaborators so that you can continuously refresh your skill set and you can continue to publish that way through your collaborators.
Thank you for that. Madison, do we have another question?
Yes,
I just
so we
answered
have two questions. One was sent to me privately, and then I will pose the second question. The first question is, if I publish 3 papers using deep learning across vastly different scenarios such as EMS, traffic, and crop diseases during my PhD, what is the best way to integrate them into a single dissertation? Is this a common practice, or what would you suggest to prepare for this dissertation?
Can I take that question?
Yeah,
Go
it
for
said
it.
your name on it,
Yep.
Richard.
Oh, it says my name on it. Okay. Well, so this is the thing with publishing with using methods. So if you are using the same data set or the same kind of method, you have to be very careful because you don't want to self-plagiarize. Or you also don't want to slice your work too thin in the set because most reviewers will notice once they've seen the work that you've published before. I do that as a reviewer. I look at once I'm sent papers to review as a reviewer, I go in to look at the work that you've done before. So if it's basically just maybe readdressing or reframing the work that has already been done, typically it's rejected. So you have to make, like what we discussed earlier, make sure the contribution that you're making is very explicit from the question you're asking, the methods you're using. Of course, you can use deep learning. Deep learning is a method that can be used on different data sets. And you can also work on different problems, or actually, you can address the same kind of problem but different data sets. You have to ensure that you're not doing the same thing and just repackaging. Repackaging is not something that is ethical. I discourage students from doing that. And I think when you look at your dissertation, and that was why my advice initially was that you begin to think about the different questions you're asking, because especially in work in machine learning, you want to start with problem finding. During the problem finding phase, you define the problem that you want to solve, then the methods that you want to use in solving those problems. So each of the problems you're solving will have distinct questions. And those distinct questions, they provide opportunities for you to be able to publish based on the answers that you will find to those questions. But not publishing on the same question, the same method, of course, that will not be professionally responsible and also ethical.
Thank you. We have one more question, Madison?
I believe Dr. Smith answered it, unless there wasn't any more need for clarification. I think we're all good.
Okay.
Bonnie, did that get at your question?
Oh, pardon?
I was just asking Stefania if she needed any amplification or explanation.
Ah, all right. My apologies.
Okay.
Okay, since we have no more questions, want to thank everyone again for attending the session. Thank you, Dr. Matthews, Dr. Olawoyin, Dr. Smith, for sharing your expertise with us. This has been a great session. You will be, for the participants, thank you for attending. You'll be receiving evaluation forms and also an announcement for our next session, which is on March 26th, and it's on inclusive teaching practices. Again, I am Tandy Soule, and I enjoyed being your moderator for this session.
Thank you, Dr. Soule,
Bye-bye.
for the
Thank
invite.
you.
Take care,
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good seeing you, Jennifer and Richard.
Great seeing you.
Good seeing you too. Bye-bye.